Your Lending Era, the podcast where we dive into the world of residential, business and commercial finance, bringing you expert insight, tips and strategies to help you navigate the intricate landscape of lending in Australia. I'm one of your hosts, Jessica, and in today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about entering the property market as an investor for the first time, just at an introductory level. So here with me today, we have Managing Director of Trilogy Funding, David Thomas.
Hey Jess, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks everyone for joining us for another week.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also have financial strategist, Hope Westbury.
Hey Jess.
Hi, you don't seem as high energy as Dave.
No, I feel really giggly today. I don't know why.
Bear with us, guys. Anywho, this topic is something we have run through quite a lot with our clients in the last 2 to 3 years, particularly with the growth of equity within properties, which we touched on a little bit a few weeks ago. So what we really wanted to do is give people who aren't, yet investing or haven't thought about it, just an introductory breakdown of what they would need to consider to get their foot in the door.
Yeah. So, and I think property investing is usually one of the first things people tend to want to invest in. Mm-hmm. Because within property investing, you're using leverage to help you buy into the asset, right? Which means you have an enhanced return. Yep. So, if we're buying at an 80% loan to value ratio, for every $2 of our own money that we're putting in, we're then leveraging $8 of the bank's money. But the asset that we're buying is still increasing by 4, 5, 6, 7%. So, and property and Australians they just go together. Australia is a very property focused country, probably more so than other countries, and it's pretty easy to see the evidence of that when you look at the top 250 BRW list. You've got 70 people in the top 250 people in the country for wealth that have created their wealth through property.
Yeah,
so
right.
It's just it's evidence. It's clear evidence everywhere you look.
Do you think that's because property is maybe the safest bet?
It's the safest bet in terms of you can touch it, you can feel it. It's got a market.
Yeah.
The market is clearly visible. Crypto, other investments. Who knows what stuff's worth, or who knows what stuff's worth in the future.
Yeah, but crypto freaks me out. And Bitcoin, I'm like, I just don't understand it.
But property, you can see it, drive past it, you can touch it, you can live in it. You know that your return is based on someone else wanting to buy that off you later on.
Yeah.
And the historical evidence of most of the time, it's always worth more than what you pay for it in the future. So, and it's worth more than what you pay for it because there is supply and demand, and there is rental yields and a return on those investments.
That good old Aussie market.
Yeah, you've got to love it down here.
You do.
Okay, so let's kind of get started at a very headline level. So what would define an investment property?
Pretty much any property that is not your primary place of residence is considered an investment property. Okay, so if it is something that you have purchased because you think that it's going to go up in value, or you've purchased something because of the rental yield, and it's going to create you some form of rental or passive income, then it's a property investment. Also, could be a property investment in terms of you're buying to hold it. So maybe a vacant block of land, or rural land, something like that, or it's a commercial property of some other form of residential commercial property investment.
Okay, and from a taxation perspective, an investment property doesn't necessarily have to produce a rental income for it to be kind of tenured under that term, does it?
No, because you might buy a block of residential land that you want to build on in the future, or you've bought it on speculation that you're either going to be able to sell it for more money later on, or you're going to be able to take a big block of land and chop it up into little blocks of land and then resell them.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't have to be income producing to be an investment property.
Yeah, I think there's a big misconception around that. I think a lot of people need to see some kind of return to think it's a worthy investment.
And I think it might be at some point, but
Yeah.
maybe it's not going to be an immediate return.
No, it's a slow burn on those ones for sure. Okay, is there a right or wrong time to start diving into the property market as an investor?
I think this question is like, how long is a piece of string?
Yeah,
because it's really going to depend on that person's individual circumstances and how well they're set up to be able to dip their toe into maybe wanting to branch out and invest. But that's where it's really important to chat to experts like brokers, accountants, financial planners, and those people are going to be able to let you know pretty quickly if you're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'd agree. So, as I always say on the show, get some advice. Surround yourself with others who can guide you as to whether what you're doing is applicable for your set of circumstances. I think when we chat and ran through this yesterday, I said, depends on what you're looking to buy. If you're looking to buy at the moment a cash flow type property residentially in a rural town, now's not the time to buy that kind of investment because you're not getting a very good return because the interest rates are so high, it's eating all of your rental income. But if you're looking at the moment thinking that you want to buy into an area that maybe has come a little bit down in value because of, a bit of rental stress, and you think that that's going to, rate stress, and you think that area is going to bounce back or be worth more in the future, then it's perfect time to buy.
Might be great. Yeah,
exactly.
So it's really going to depend.
Depending on what your risk appetite is, really.
Yeah, and that too. That's a big part of it.
Yeah. And now one thing that I've heard a little bit of, particularly in other podcasts at the moment, is this idea of rent vesting. Now, what does that mean?
So rent vesting is renting where you want to live, but investing where you can. Okay. So, it'd be amazing to have a whole heap of, properties that are on the beach. You may want to live on the beach, but you may not be able to afford a property on the beach, right? So it's just a case of having a chat with someone and working out what you can invest in based on your math and numbers and what makes sense for your set of circumstances, and making that purchase. And not kind of locking yourself out of the market. A lot of people believe, well, I can't afford to buy where I want to live, so I just won't buy anything. And rent vesting kind of flips that idea on its head and says, well, no, you should, where you live, if you can only afford to rent there, that's fine, but you can probably afford to buy some property. It's just probably somewhere else. So quite often we'll find our clients here in Canberra, especially those that, they've migrated to Canberra for some other reason. They've come, and they've come here for jobs or whatever. They've got older kids. And, they may have migrated to Canberra with older kids that are going to private school, and where they want to live, they just can't afford that market. So they will just go, okay, well, we're just going to continue to rent here because the kids are going to these schools. And then when that's all said and done and this job's finished, we'll move back to wherever we come from. But we will, continue to invest in property, just not where we're going to live for the next 5 years.
And we see that a lot as well with our clients in Sydney is a prime example. They'll have a home, 2 or 3 bedroom home in like the western suburbs, but they're renting in Bondi or Pyrmont because they need the locality for employment.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and they don't want, obviously, if you're looking at western suburbs into Sydney every day.
Bit of a drive.
That's a hell of a commute.
It's a big commitment.
I think it's a good idea. I think that it's a good idea to, if you've got money in the bank, to, rent, live where you need to live or want to live, and then use the money that's just sitting in the bank doing nothing and pouring that into an asset that, is hopefully really going to pay off in the years to come.
Yeah. And sometimes we see younger clients use this.
Yeah.
They'll be renting in a group house, 3 of them, having a great time at age 26 through 28 or 9.
Miss those days.
And but they won't let that stop them, from making a purchase because, the parents are like, well, you've got to get into the property market, go out and buy something.
Yeah.
And they'll go out and buy something, but it might be out and, they might be living in Braddon having a great time, and they might be, buying a property, off the plan apartment out in Gungahlin.
Yeah.
They're still getting into the market.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You've got to have a go.
I think as long as you're going into it with kind of some sound advice and a plan, like you probably can't do it and then 6 months down the track be like, oh, I'm going to sell this because I don't want it anymore. I've paid stamp duty.
Yep.
Not ahead.
5 to 7 years. What do you reckon, Dave?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think all property, you need at least 5 years to get in and get out. Yeah. There is currently some statistics floating around about properties that have been relisted for market, on the market within the last 2 years. And the percentage of those being sold at a loss is, depending on the state, between 15 and 25%.
Yeah, which is exactly what we don't want.
No, not at all. Because
so you can't get in and get out very quickly because you're paying stamp duty, you're paying, selling costs and all these type of things. You need time to let the asset do its work.
Yeah, and that kind of segues into the next point that we're going to talk about, and that is the traditional requirements to purchase an investment property so that there are kind of those buffers in place for the 5-year plan and not selling it at a loss.
Yeah, exactly. So the traditional requirements would be you've got to have cash or you need to have equity within an existing property.
Another property, yeah. Okay, so that's essentially just what you're going to put down to bridge the gap.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, and what would a traditional investment property loan look like?
So they're a little bit more conservative than an owner-occupied loan. So we were chatting on the podcast a couple of weeks ago about, getting your foot in the door with a, 5% deposit or even less. In investment properties, most lenders are looking for a 90% loan-to-value ratio inclusive of lender's mortgage insurance.
Yeah.
So therefore, we need a slightly bigger deposit. The other thing with it is the rate is slightly higher. Okay, so they're typically between kind of 0.3% and 0.5% more than a normal residential home loan.
Yeah.
And that kind of stems back from other conversations that we've had about the APRA ASIC changes 2014.
Yeah.
Prior to that, they were the same rate, but obviously after that, there's a...
What a time to be alive, the same rate for investing and owning.
It was the same rate and the same LVR restrictions because when I started my broking career, it was 95% inclusive
wild.
of LMI for investment.
So there is a few more hurdles to jump through for property investment, but once you know what's going to be required, it's a pretty straightforward path.
And it does make sense that there are some more regulations around it because, again, investing in anything has its risks every single time and the banks need to allow for those risks.
Yeah.
I think it's especially because there's going to be tenants in the property and historically tenants are a bit rougher on properties than, if the owner was to be actually living there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's more risk to the lender.
Yeah.
So the other thing to remember with property investment loans is they can be either interest only or principal and interest. Yeah. Whereas we chatted the other week about, owner-occupied loans are traditionally principal and interest. With investor loans, you get the choice, and the choice depends on cash flow and what your strategy is for the property.
Okay.
So if your strategy is to, I'm renting over here, I'm a rent investor, and I'm going to go and buy this other property over here, and you go, okay, well, what's your plan with that? Well, I'm going to buy it, it's going to go up in value, I'm going to pay it down, and then I'm going to take that larger amount of money and roll it into a principal price of residence when Mr. or Mrs. Right comes along and I want to buy a family home. Then, okay, we'll put it on principal and interest. That would make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's certain circumstances where one or the other is applicable, but it does come down to what your long-term goals are anyway.
Yeah. If you've got a property that you've bought on Bondi Beach and you think it's going to rocket up in value, and it's got a terrible rental return and you're really in there for a capital growth play, well, interest only might be the best thing for you.
Cash flow enhancement. Absolutely. Yeah. Now, let's talk a little bit about the headline benefits. So just the pretty little daisies of investing in property.
The pretty little daisies that I think most people roughly know about would first and foremost be tax benefits.
Yes, I hear that a lot.
And because I'm not an accountant, I won't go too far into that, but that's the first one. The second one would be passive income and wealth generation. Yep. Those would be a biggie. And then retirement. So forward planning, future planning to what an individual or a couple's lifestyle they want it to look like when they do retire. Maybe they want to build a portfolio while they're working so that come retirement they can sell off those investments and happy days for them.
And just kick off with the money. Actually, I know we help a lot of clients, particularly in their 50s of late, who are purchasing a property in Queensland.
Yep.
And they want to pop a tenant in it for 10, 15 years with the goal in mind that by the time they get up there, it's essentially half paid off.
Mate, isn't that what you do?
Yes. So at the age of 45, I'm making decisions most 55-year-olds are making.
No. But in all sense, it does make sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense to have a bit of a long-term goal. And, there's a flip side of that. Hope's given you all the warm and fuzzy stuff.
The
and
daisies.
How wonderful it is. So I'll probably balance that up by going, there are some cons with investing in property as well. So it's not a fluid investment. As we discussed before, you can't buy one this month and then expect to flip it in 6 months' time and make a massive profit. It doesn't always work like that.
No.
So it's not a fluid investment. It is an investment that you are reliant on a few other things. So you're reliant on the cash flow staying somewhat in line with your projections. Yeah. So, you do your bit of homework, you go, okay, I'll buy this property for $500,000, I'll pay an interest rate of, 5%, and I'll get a 4.5% rental return. There's a gap plus cost there of 0.5%. I can deal with that, but you've got to remember that maybe the interest rate goes up and maybe the rental income comes back. And then maybe the gap is bigger than you thought, right? So that cash flow issue and that holding cost is probably the biggest con when it comes to investing in residential property because the numbers can change a little bit and you're not the person that's driving the change.
No.
So the market is driving it in rates and the market's driving it for rental return and you're a bit of a passenger. So that's probably the clients that I have seen that they've got a bit of negativity around their property investment journey is because they didn't kind of factor in what happens when things kind of get out of adjustment. And they're not necessarily adjustment forever. Interest rates go up, interest rates go down, rental returns go down, rental returns go up. It's a period in time. You've got to be able to weather the storm.
Yeah. Demand goes up and down too. But if you're cashed up, if you've got a high income, if things are looking good, then you're going to be able to weather those storms. I think it's maybe if you branched out, maybe push the envelope too far, then you're going to maybe run into those struggles.
Yeah, and you got to remember the property market is supply and demand driven, okay? So you might buy something today for $900 and in 2 years' time, it's worth $850. And you're thinking, oh, my God, I need to cut my losses and get out. This hasn't worked. But you got to remember, in 10 years' time, it might be worth 1.3. Yeah. So it's time. You've got to have the time to weather the storm. Yeah. And that's probably the biggest con for some people is, they want everything and they want it right now and they don't have the patience. You've got to be patient in property.
It's the long game.
And that's the thing, that patience piece really is so important. Because we are starting to see people who purchased property in 2021 when rates were 2-3%. And now they're already selling, and they are selling at that 15 to 20% loss like we were discussing earlier. And it is because they potentially hopped in a little bit too eager and they didn't consider the consequences down the line. And now they can't justify spending that money, but they also don't have the patience to wait for a better day.
But their outcome, if they waited for another 5 years, would be quite a good outcome.
Substantially different, right?
Yeah.
We love a budding investor. We love that. We love the enthusiasm. We love people that want to grow their portfolio and generate wealth. But it's about making really good decisions up front so that you don't run into those troubles and have a bad experience.
You don't panic at the first setback.
No.
You've got to just dig your feet in and say, this is my property. I'm going to make some money.
Roll with the punches for a bit.
Mate, for 2 years straight. Okay. And if someone is looking to enter the market as a property investor, how long would you traditionally say you want them to sit on the idea and just weigh it up?
I reckon 3 months.
Yeah. Okay.
I reckon do your research. I hate that saying post-COVID, do your research. But honestly, do your research. And as I said earlier, engage the right people around you. So whether that is a really good broker, whether that is an accountant, financial planner, buyer's agent, you might have friends that are in real estate or developers. Yeah. And I think it's just about having those conversations about, maybe their experiences and things that they would do or wouldn't do. And just gaining as much knowledge as you can about, because this is going to be a big decision, as we've discussed. Absolutely. And so personally, if I was going to make a massive decision like that, I would just want to gather as much information as I could and then make a really informed decision off the back of that.
Yep. And once you're comfortable with the math and the numbers and how long you're going to, hold the property for and what the tax benefits look like and things like that, it's really easy to say yes. Clients sometimes suffer from, a little bit of paralysis in terms of, when to purchase a property. But that's just because they just don't have enough information yet to be comfortable in the decision that they're making.
Yeah. And I think off the back of that, Dave, as well, I think and it's really important to note this, guys, is that an investment is not an emotional decision.
No, it can't be.
When you buy your own home, or a new car, yes, absolutely, that's so emotional. There's lots of emotions involved with that. But when you're buying an investment property, it's not emotional. It needs to be a purely financial informed decision.
And I feel like if you've been looking for a year and a half and the right one hasn't come up, potentially the right one doesn't exist.
Yeah, probably not for you.
Not for you.
Or you just don't have the knowledge that you need to have in order to pull the trigger.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now let's just end this discussion here, guys, with just our top things to remember when you do want to jump in the deep end, I'll call it, and start this journey.
Look, the first thing is obviously set a budget early and then start chatting about, how much deposit you're going to need and what your borrowing options are going to be.
Yep.
And just it's all about doing an early budget.
Yes, absolutely.
Unless you're a cash buyer,
then you don't have to budget. You've got cash.
Run with the wind.
And on the back of the costs and the budget, I think another thing that often people do forget sometimes is the ongoing and upfront costs.
Yeah, I think establishing the potential upfront and ongoing cost to determine if this will fit your needs is really important because as we've just touched on, investing in property can be risky.
Yes.
There's lots of different moving parts and you're going to need to have that cash flow ready in case something happens, like rates, tenant moves out, whatever it may be.
Yeah, and if you're not good at numbers, that's fine. There is so much software out there and so many people that are in possession of this software that they can help and run those numbers for you.
Yeah, you just have to get connected with the right people.
Yeah, we've got it in the office. Most buyers agents have it and some real estate agents have it. A lot of property managers have it. So, just ask who's got the software that can do a bit of analysis for you on your proposed purchase. Just run some numbers and see how it's all going to pan out.
Yeah.
Yep, and off the back of the numbers, the location is also something that's quite important here.
Yeah, and I think it's a common sense approach with that. It's finding a property that's in an area that someone is going to want to buy it off you in the future for more than what you paid, right? So is there demand in that area? And finding a property that someone is going to want to pay you a reasonable amount of rent to live in during that period. If you tick both of those two boxes, then that's a good investment.
Yeah.
We're looking in the right area.
Yeah, and on the back of paying rent, let's talk about another thing that needs to always be considered, and that's managing the property because it's like a whole side job.
It is. I reckon I'm biased with this because I have a couple of really good friends of mine that are property managers and take me, for example, between my career, being a mum, juggling everything outside of that as well, I am so incredibly time poor. There is no way that if I had a portfolio of, 2, 3, however many properties, that I could manage that by myself. So I think, again, it's really important to weigh up, the time and, lack of experience and expertise to manage those properties, or you're going to engage a professional and yes, you have to pay them a fee for the amazing work that they do, essentially maybe at the other end it's going to be more costly anyway if you don't employ that person to do it.
Yeah. And even not the cost factor. Like I've managed properties myself and I've employed the services of property managers ever since. And the reason being is you need sometimes a bit of a buffer, a bit of a conduit between yourself and your potential tenant, because the tenants have to, there's things that they need to do, there's things that need to be accountable for. Someone has to hold them accountable for cleaning the oven and make sure it's all tidy during house inspections and, all that kind of stuff. And I'm not the person to do that.
No, I'm definitely not
far
either.
Too nice and friendly for all that kind of stuff.
I don't know about that. Calm down.
You've got a sick dog, so you haven't mowed the lawn for 6 months. No, that's okay.
So look, you need a middleman between yourself and the tenant to make sure that everyone's doing their job.
Everyone's held responsible. And on the back of that, as you mentioned, kind of the differences in state to state as well.
Yeah.
What do people need to know in terms of the legalities of these things?
The legalities do move, but your requirements as a landlord and their requirements as a tenant does move a little bit from state to state. So I would usually say surround yourself with people that can give you good advice, right?
Yeah.
So, number one, property management. Okay, they know all the rules and regulations for the state that they're dealing with. And second is, if it comes to this stage, get some legal advice if you do have some, and get it early if you do have some tenants that aren't, kind of pulling their weight.
Particularly if you purchase a property with an existing tenant, that's probably where the legal advice piece is paramount to make sure that the existing lease has been maintained well.
Yeah, correct. And if you are buying a tenanted property, and maybe that is a tenanted property because that landlord is sick of dealing with that tenant.
Yes.
Let's have get your lawyer to get in there and have a good look at the lease and what's been going on, and get the property management statements to check for consistency of paid rent and all that kind of stuff, and go from there.
That's a good one.
Yeah, because I know if I was selling an investment property with a really crappy tenant, I'd be like, no, they're great. They pay every Wednesday.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely, take
Best
them off
tenant
my
I've ever
hands.
had. Yeah.
I'm only selling because I'm moving away.
Sure.
That old chestnut. And then finally, which we can't touch on too much because we are not licensed accountants or financial planners, but let's just talk a little bit about the taxation things that need to be considered.
Yeah, no one sue me, please. But the piece of advice, general advice that I'd give about this is just to get familiar with your taxation changes and obligations. So things like negative gearing, capital gains, all of that jazz. Yep. When I was talking earlier about the 3-month period of trying to decide whether you're going to actually tip your toe in and jump into the world of investing, I think when you're doing your research around that, these are all the words that are going to start to circulate. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's a very fine line with property investment. You want to make sure that you're dealing with a tax agent that makes sure that you're not missing any deductions, but also helps you not kind of overstretch the deductions that you are claiming.
Yeah.
So it's a fine line. You want to get what's yours by tax deductions, but not draw the attention of the good people at the Australian Taxation Office.
You don't want to be audited every year because you've got a slippery person by your side trying to save you $20.
We want to avoid that.
Yeah.
No, we want to do things responsibly. Okay, well, just a small disclaimer right at the back end here. So everything that we've spoken about, again, is just between us. We're all friends here. It's not advice or a recommendation of planning or funding in any way, is it?
No. General advice.
General advice. Get specific advice tailored by the appropriate people.
And if you do want to get any specific advice from David or Hope here or anyone at Team Trilogy, head over to our website at trilogyfunding.com.au. You're able to book a consultation online with the click of a button. I think I tried it the other day and it's 4 clicks. So that's like, you can't get better than that. 4 clicks. It's like 3 Netflix shows. So thank you very much, everyone who has tuned in today and joined us while we spoke about entering the investment market at an introductory level.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Jess.
Perfect.
Thanks for having us again.
Thanks,
David. Thanks,
See you
Hope.
guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
We acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land this podcast is being recorded, the Ngunnawal people. We pay our respects to the elders of the Ngunnawal people, both past and present.